background on Brunelleschi and the foundation of perspectival viewing and drawing. But we're really more interested in perspective in the sense of point of view. And we want to talk about perspective and the way we see life and art. And we're going to tell you a little story about what happened.
We have a long story to tell in a short time.
Yeah, we do. We can talk for about 3 hours. So.
Okay, so it's sometimes hard to remember the Durham of 2 decades ago when you're walking around downtown. So how many of you were here in 2006? Wow, that's pretty impressive. Looks like 30, 40% maybe. Mm-hmm. So we want to give you a little snapshot of what happened in 2006, the Georges Rousse project. There's some information about it on the table over there. We were very early members of the Believers Club in Durham. Both Ellen and I bought buildings downtown in the late 1990s for a terrifyingly low price to house our businesses. And we've been boosters and supporters ever since.
We just both knew there was so much potential. And so in 2006, there were about 200,000 people living in Durham. And now, fast forward 18 years later, an additional 100,000 have moved here. So it's a big jump.
And in the downtown core, back in that time, there were 1,800 people living downtown. Most of the storefronts were empty. The windows were boarded up in buildings. The American Tobacco campus had its very first tenant. But now there are 12,000 people living in a very thriving downtown, which is a six-fold increase.
So back then, the city fathers and mothers were slowly pushing the development rock up the hill, but it was slow going. And in 2003, we had learned about a French artist named Georges Rousse, and I think some of you were working on the puzzle in the back of the room. And we kept seeing these fabulous images in various magazines, and we said, wow, this guy's really good at Photoshop. What's the big deal? Why so much press?
He was getting a huge amount of ink, and then we figured it out, that these were not in fact Photoshop, but weeks of volunteers working to physically manipulate the space with paint and drywall and cutting away walls, etc., to make these extraordinary hypergraphic images. And the Georges works in buildings that are about to be demolished or renovated, and that was sort of the major building type of Durham, North Carolina in 2006.
So when you take a look at the image on the left and the upper right, that is off-axis, and the lower right is at his one point where he has his camera set up on a tripod from the very beginning of the project, and you see it perfectly. But it's so cool off-axis too.
So we got really fired up about the possibility of bringing Georges to Durham, and in 2006 we did so, and we had a whirlwind weekend where we showed him 12 different sites, and we were hopeful that he might create a piece in one of these buildings.
So can you imagine today us approaching building owners and saying, we really like to use your building for about a month.
For free.
For free, 6 months from now, and we're going to do some sort of art thing, and it's probably going to leave some indelible marks on your building. Paint, we might be cutting some walls. That's okay, right?
And believe it or not, they all said, sure. No one else is doing anything with the buildings. Have at it.
So, kind of crazy. So here we were, Liberty Warehouse on the upper left, which is now the Liberty Apartments. and the edge of Durham Central Park.
This is Bargain Furniture, which is now Google Fiber, very much right across the street.
Literally across the plaza. This is on Main Street, the Baldwin Building, which actually looks very similar because it was a great old building back then, and it's a great old building now.
We took this picture last night.
Yeah. So that, unfortunately, Copa, I think, maybe went under, so they're not there anymore. Yeah, I was sad.
And this is the Chesterfield building where Chesterfield cigarettes were made, and it's at the corner of Main and Duke Streets, and currently houses the Wexford Science and Technology, and I think a couple other clients.
Yeah. So we got to work, and George came, and we had an organizational meeting at my office, and literally, there's some postcards over there. This is at the infancy of the internet.
Yeah, like there was not really people using email very much, and we were putting signs up on telephone poles with staplers.
Yeah. So we had a meeting at my office, and more than 100 people came. And we said, "Wow, what's going on here?" And they actually didn't know what was going on either. They was just really curious.
It just completely blew up and way beyond our expectations. We had tons of students involved. We got a good chuckle when someone came up to us and asked us where the curriculum committee meeting was. We were unaware that there was a curriculum committee, but folks were just stepping up, and a couple teachers said, we need to talk about this in the schools, and they started a curriculum committee. And
it's a teachable moment, and there's just so much to learn. And so there were so many students involved, and there's also a little booklet over there filled with the 19 articles that were written about the project. And Maria, can you wave your hand? She worked at the Indy at the time, and I was going over the booklet with her. She's like, "Oh yeah, I did that. Yeah, I did that." So thank you, Maria.
So during the project, again, another question we got was, under what auspices or what organization is sponsoring this project? And it was like, there is no auspices here. We just thought it would be a cool thing, and all these people showed up and got super excited, and we had 200 volunteers, and you wanted to talk.
You're going to see this image in a few more images, and this is before the blue paint. But just to let you know that these two walls are actually curved planes, hyperbolic paraboloids for those architectural problems. Yeah.
So one of the sweetest stories during this time, I mean, we mentioned that it was so organic, and people were just, whatever we needed, it was offered. And somebody cut their hand at the Baldwin building, and one of the volunteers ran across the street to Gurley's Pharmacy to buy some Band-Aids. And somebody saw them at the cash register and said, "Can I pay for the Band-Aids? I can't get off work, but I want to help the project."
That was really sweet. So we were basically in 4 different buildings doing these 11 projects, and so there were 2 site captains at each location, and we had a master carpenter and a French speaker, and sometimes that person was the same person. So I used to live in France, and so I'm an architect, so I was pulling in lots of favors, and it was a big ask to have these people come and help us. And a couple of the carpenters would say, "Well, I can come on Saturday," and then they go, "Oh, well, I'll be here tomorrow." And then at the end of Sunday afternoon, they said, "I called my boss. I'm just taking a week off."
My wife has many superpowers, but when I told her we need to find 4 bilingual master carpenters that would work for free, she said, "Okay, I'll do that." And she did.
So we had various needs, and they just kept getting filled. So we needed an apartment. Someone gave an apartment. We needed a car. Someone gave us a car.
We needed someone to feed 30 or 40 volunteers every day for 3 weeks. And Giorgio Bacchus said, "Sure, I'll do that for free for a month."
Yeah.
It was just...
Do Do you remember George's Garage?
George's Garage every day for the volunteers. I was in heaven.
Not bad. So, and as was mentioned before, a documentary film was made about this, but we sort of didn't know about it. They just showed up and started filming.
This was Kenny Dahlsheimer and Penelope Monsell, two filmmakers. The film is actually over there and you can download it or you can stream it. It's called Bending Space. It is a feature-length documentary about the project, and you get to watch Ellen crying on the roof of the Chesterfield building, one of the peak moments of the film.
So, and this is George. So this is in the bowels of Liberty Warehouse, and so you can see the dirt floor, and he was just great. And then the next image is the shot, and so just to explain this a little bit, in the very center, the white drywall all the way back in the center is 13 feet tall, and the drywall to the far left and to the far right is 30 inches tall. So,
and there's about 120 feet of depth in that shot.
we're talking perspective.
We made some awesome pieces. This is in the old Baldwin department store. It was the first project that we executed. You saw the painting of that in one of the earlier slides. And Georges wanted to find the perfect color, and the site captain, Rene Leverty, had this color t-shirt on, and he said, "We make from the color from the shirt of Rene."
And then he would often sort of remake pieces. So this is that same pink square divided into four. And I will say, so this is the building that I said was such the nice historic building on Main Street. And so because it was historic, we needed to put a little bit of plywood on the floor because we couldn't be hurting the floor. And then the windows in the upper right, we had put film on that. And then of course, a couple years later, it became a kitchen.
So this is, again, right across the street here, the Bargain Furniture Building. You can see the incredibly nasty carpet. This was basically an abandoned building. A lot of students involved in making this piece. And then we followed up with this piece. And Georges had a technique of using chalk on the edges of all of the lines in the space.
And you can imagine it's so easy to get the students involved because there's a good framework and they can, just get involved in a very active way. So this is the same building down on the street level, and you're looking through a whole series of shop windows.
And so this is the wooden structure. This was one of the last pieces we did, and Georges sort of said, "I've always wanted to do this piece, but I normally have young student volunteers," and all of a sudden he had a bunch of master carpenters, so he decided in midstream to change his mind to do this pretty adventurous project, which looks incredibly simple, but is these twisted planes of plywood, and very, very cool project.
And so that one was in the cafeteria of the Chesterfield building, and then this is up on the fourth floor, so where it was actively, or had actively been creating cigarettes. And you can see that he used the window, so the three white bars, so that's a real window there.
And there was still a ton of tobacco on the floor. The smell was incredibly potent in these buildings of tobacco.
And then this was the original image that you saw, and so this is the stairwell of Chesterfield.
The graphic designers will love this particular piece. We love this image because this kind of stuff just happened. Not only did this impromptu signage happen, but the events on the sign happened. We would show up at a building and there would be 4 events planned that we didn't know about.
And go to the next one. So another thing to say about Georges is when he sets all these up, and it's very meticulous, and he takes that one photograph, and that photograph is the art that he displays in very fancy galleries and sells 5 of them and makes a bunch of money. But nobody goes to look at the installations. And so we had people standing in line. I mean, we figured there were about 5,000 people who came to see this. And so I was talking to George and I said, so how does this compare to your other openings? And, just trying to make French small talk. And he said, nobody comes to look at these pieces.
And I assure you, in 2006, there hadn't been 5,000 people downtown in a very long time. These are some kids from the Center Park School for Children, and Juliet in the background there was one of our super volunteer docents who did so many different school tours.
She was doing the curriculum committee.
She was. And this is a very young Ellen, leading folks through bargain furniture.
So, yeah, bargain furniture was pretty skanky at that point. But we could not have imagined the fire and the spark that was just waiting to be ignited. And I see some nodding heads. And can I ask a question? How many people here saw some of these images?
How many people painted them?
Okay, and how many painted?
Woo! So, and it was astonishing how little money this project cost. This entire project cost less than $25,000. It was just so amazing how generous the community was and how much just folks being fired up makes the budget not so critical.
So it really was true. Bringing one artist here really did make a big effect. And then we wonder, could this happen again in Durham today? Probably not, because you couldn't find those buildings. But we did invite him back for a 10-year reunion. And he did 2 projects in Tim's building.
Where's Tim? Tim, the amazing fruit proprietor back there. One of the fabulous, fabulous arts venues in the Triangle. So George asked us in advance to collect newspapers from around the world and have volunteers paint out all of the images. So what you're seeing here on floor, ceiling, and all the walls are newspapers, and then he does these word installations, and like all of his pieces, it looks like it's hanging in space and is all the same size, but it's really, really not. And you can see it a little better in this image, how the M is going through. And this is one of our artists, visual activist, Zanella Maholi from South Africa, who just happened to be in town during the 10-year...
In the meantime, we had started the residency, and she was our artist in resident. And then this is the other image that was created at the fruit upstairs.
Tim, is any of this left? The blue?
Still there.
The blue,
Still there.
And the dream? Is the dream still there?
Dream is pretty tattered.
Yeah.
Living the dream.
Yeah. So, inspired by all this fabulous, energetic activity, when we were designing our house, we said we want to have a space for artists to come. And we're going to have an artist residency program.
And that's what's on the left there.
On the left-hand side.
This is one of our early artists, Doug Bube, who's we call him a book artist. He cuts and manipulates books to make sculptural pieces.
And so we live on the left-hand side, the artists are on the right-hand side, and we have a gallery bridge that connects the two.
And we have, of course, have had artists of all stripes, painters, curators, musicians. We were disabused pretty early on by a poet from Tennessee that we should be exclusively a visual arts residency. So quickly after she insinuated herself, we started having dancers and choreographers and screenwriters and theatrical directors and non-visual artists.
And Beleza was our first musical artist, and I think some people can get a little intimidated by art, and so it was like, well, we hope the artist talk will fill up. And then when we advertised Beleza, it filled up to double capacity.
We had 120 RSVPs in 2 hours.
And we told them we were going to send the invitation out the night before, and then the next day they said, well, is anyone going to come? And we said, well, we have good news and bad news. Yes, lots of people are going to come.
And can you do 2 sets?
And they did. Yeah. So stick sculptors, photographers, and
This is at the Nasher Museum. Michelle Dorrance is a MacArthur Genius grantee and reviver of tap.
So we do a lot of partnerships with ADF and
Full Frame.
and lots of other arts groups.
Some folks here may know Tiff Merritt, singer-songwriter. She was an amazing visitor and did an entire album while she was there.
And Zanella, again, with her posse from Johannesburg.
This was one of our newbies. Ellen discovered this artist when he was in his mid-20s, and he was, at the time, the youngest artist we'd ever had. He's gone on to rock stardom in the photography world.
And also in the photography world.
And in the rock star department.
Rock star department is Lola Flash. We call her the living legend.
These are some quick and fun facts about the residency program and the exhibition program.
So the artists, we give them space and time, and they want to know what can we do in return. So we ask them to make some meaningful connection with the community, and so that could come in many forms.
Can be a workshop, can be an artist talk, can be a lecture. We had some folks give portfolio reviews to local artists to review their work.
This is a performance in our house with ACO, who happens to be in town now doing another residency, not with us, with ADF.
If you're ADFers, I'm sure you know ACO and Como, who have been coming to ADF for a very long time.
And then this next one is at the partnership with the Nasher, when we invited Nama Savar, and she did a fabulous performance with 21 female and female identifying artists.
There's something incredibly powerful about 21 women standing on top of their guitar amps, playing to a crowd. And we did a collaboration with the new MFA program in dance at Duke. This is John Felix Arnold, our resident, with Leo Ryan doing a live drawing in response to Leo's movement. We also have a artist talk program. This is Cheryl Rowland. The Raleigheites will know Cheryl. He's at Anchor Light. We
could do a whole Creative Mornings just on Chris McCaw, and we're already at past 20 minutes. When we met Chris, he was basically living out of his van and traveling around doing photographs very unconventionally.
This is a very large camera.
And he was instead of putting film in the camera, he was putting expired paper, photographic paper in the back. And so as the sun would go across the sky, just like you would burn leaves, the sun would go through these super lenses and burn the paper.
There were smoke and flames coming out of the camera.
And so the next image you'll see, there's 4 big pieces of paper. And these pieces of paper are, 18 by 24,
So Chris's problem
stay up all night.
Was that he had to stay up for 24 hours to change and move the camera in real time. And this whole project started because Chris got drunk while camping and fell asleep and woke up to the camera burning. So Chris, we always say to the artists when they come, aim high, get out of your comfort zone. How can we make something happen? No promises, but so Chris said, okay, I want to be able to put in a GPS coordinate into the camera, have it mechanically track the sun from any point on Earth, and me not have to do anything. And he said, and I know nothing about optics, mechanics, coding, or circuitry. And so...
And in the best statement, so Frank did some fabulous research and found a great partner at UNC.
He was the chair of the physics and astronomy department, Dr. Chris Clemens, and he's responsible for my favorite quote of all time. He said, "What Chris proposes is likely impossible. When do we get started?"
So Chris started a 4-credit course at UNC school, and he had students that ranged from PhD, master's, undergrad, and a very precocious and smart high schooler. And
These were the
they
smartest
did-
humans I've ever encountered in my life.
They did everything, and they were so excited about working on this project, and that their mathematics and astronomy and physics skills were going to help art. It was kind of amazing for them. And so Chris had a working prototype when he arrived.
And he took this camera to the Arctic Circle and many other amazing places to make these images. And he is now legitimate super rock star. Solo shows at the Getty Museum in Los Angeles, Paris shows, New York shows, work sells at way, way more money than humans can afford. And he is still the most down-to-earth, amazing guy.
And in the artist side of the house, we have a big door that you can see right here. And that's the first 5 years. And there's another panel that is...
First 10 years.
First 10 years, and then the second panel of the door. So we ask each of the artists to sign it in their own special way. And you can see right up here that burn mark. That was Chris. He took it off.
You don't want to get the call from Chris saying, "Can I take the door off the hinges?" So we also host an exhibition program. This is a show that we did in the gallery space called Uncommon, featuring the work of Hillsborough-based photographer Elizabeth Matheson, amazing 50-year life retrospective. We have about 4 exhibitions a year. We don't have public hours at Castle House, but we have a lot of openings, closings, artist talks, student groups.
Lots of student groups come. These are high schoolers and...
High school darkroom students from the Durham Public Schools.
And then the next one is the Duke and UNC MFA programs. First time they've gotten together.
No one ever had the idea to have them be in the same room. They actually liked each other.
Cross-pollinate. So we also did a project with the UNCG students. They had a curatorial program, and they came to the house and looked through our collection 4 times and created works in response to the works they wanted to put in the show, and then they mounted a whole show at UNCG.
Yeah, this was just up at the Gatewood Gallery in Greensboro a couple of months ago. We also had a Castle House First. We traveled the Elizabeth Matheson show to Upstairs Art Space in Tryon, North Carolina. First time we had ever traveled a show. This is Elizabeth doing an artist talk.
And then we have interns from this year from Duke. Sometimes they're from UNC. And so they're a big help, and they are paid interns. And copious amounts of volunteer hours on our part, more Frank's, less Ellen's. I have an office to run. And then our secret sauce.
Our secret sauce, people ask us how we do this or how we pay for this. We rent the space on Airbnb 6 months of the year, and that pays for the other 6 months of the year to give it away for free. I just took this picture. This is Louis, who is back for his 3rd time. He lives in Raleigh. He comes to Castle House to do staycations, and he was just here for 3 days, and he is so on board for the mission and knowing that every time 100% of the proceeds from the Airbnb support this art program.
And when Louis came the first time, he said, "This is just amazing." And I told my wife about it every night. And you know what? You can leave the sheets on, I'm gonna leave, and my wife is coming. Okay.
So, what have we learned in our 15 years since then? We learned that Durham is really hungry for art.
We also learned you cannot wait around for the fill-in-the-blank arts organization to do what you want to do. If you have an idea and you're passionate about it, tell your posse and get it going.
This was in the Bargain Furniture building. It's one of my favorite shots from the project. Small budgets don't mean small impact.
And we also learned to never, ever underestimate the power of a few
Crazed.
Crazed art activists.
And art changes people's perspectives.
And sometimes the seed that you plant grows way, way beyond your expectations.
Wow, that's so sweet.
Everything we do at Konhaus is free and open to the public, and if you sign up here, you get invited to everything. And if we have an opening, you know, we can hold lots of people. If we have an artist talk, we can only hold about 50 people, so you gotta be fast.
So we're happy to field any questions about the Georges Roos project, about Cassilhouse.
So just real quick, a time check, just let you all know it's nearly 10 o'clock, so feel free to get up and leave if you need. I know Frank's gonna have to leave at like 5 after, so ask any questions that Frank must answer real quick.
We have a student group from Duke coming at 10:30, and I didn't know this existed, but it is a graduate level class in arts policy from the Sanford Institute. Who knew? Question.
Yeah?
So, first of all, thank you so much. This has been incredible. My name is Patrice Boyd, and I run the Center for Entrepreneurship at North Carolina Central. So I've heard Duke, I've heard UNC. Have you done any work with Central? And if not, are you interested?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
We have not, and we are interested.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
She wanted to know if we had done any collaborations with NCCU.
All right, go back to you first. Get my steps in.
You had mentioned you got a lot of community buy-in. What was kind of the messaging, the story of this concept that you got so many people to contribute or just come in? I mean, you had, what, 100, 200 people and then all the donations. So what was that kind of messaging, that story to get that buy-in or build momentum?
Yeah, it was definitely grassroots, and I think that initial meeting at my office got lots of people, and those people told people who told people who told people. But I think that it doesn't sound, it was really depressed. I think people really wanted something joyful.
I think, you know, we give a huge amount of credit to Georges himself. The work, when we brought Georges here,
It's very compelling work.
we said, you know, I mean, we're going to be on the hook for the plane ticket. Before we ask anybody for money, we're going to get him here. And we did a little thing at my office. We just showed, I mean, if you Googled his work, it is astonishing. And he's been doing it for 60-some years. We showed a little, like, 3-minute clip of his work, and people just, like, they just, like, brought the checkbooks out. Like, how can we make this happen here? We raised, like, $7,500 in an hour as soon as we showed this material. I mean, the work is just off the charts. And it's even a lot better known now than it was then. It was really revolutionary to see it.
I would also say that after we had this first initial fundraiser, so I asked George, I said, oh, you must get so tired of going to fundraisers and all that. And he's like, I'm from France. We don't have fundraisers for art. I think this is so beautiful that your friends are giving you money to support art.
He thought it was so novel. There was no culture at all in France of charitable giving because the state covers the arts. And so it was really, you know, a truly novel idea for him. Yeah.
Well, first of all, I met you guys about 8 years ago. I was amazed back then. I'm still amazed now. I just wanted to know, in the near future, is there a possibility for a Cassilhouse 2.0, like a warehouse where you have residencies there for multiple artists?
All we will say is you need to invite us back in a year. We're working on a big project that we can't talk about. About the house?
About the house? Yes. Well, we did change a few things already. So we thought that we would do 6 months of artists and 6 months of Airbnb. And it was, both were too intense. And so now, and Frank is the master scheduler, he schedules the artists a year and a half in advance, and not sequential, and then fills in with Airbnb in between.
Yeah, that little alcove in the shower where you put your shampoo, I'd make that wider, but I think that's the only change that I would make.
More questions? No more questions?
Well, I have a comment. I just, want to respond also to the George Roos project, and it was sort of a miraculous coming together at a time when people were hungry for it, and you guys had this idea and brought it in, and it was one of the most creative, influential things that I think has ever happened in Durham, and I think it was a moment in time that is kind of unrepeatable.
Thank you, Grace. It really did feel like a tipping point. As folks, I had my business downtown since 1997, and I literally, the only thing in Durham was the Marriott. I mean, there was nothing, no restaurants, nothing. And, I just felt like a solo person downtown in my office. And after George Roos, it just seemed to come alive.
So I'll ask you a question. So one of the beautiful things about being able to invite folks in the Triangle community to speak is often the talk is unexpected. Originally, I reached out to Ellen because my background is in the architecture world, and I reached out to her as an architect. She was like, "I have such a better story to share about this whole other thing." So I'm curious.
It's all connected.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really curious. What's the most unexpected performance or piece of art that you reached out to an artist knowing their portfolio, but just what came out of it just was absolutely unexpected?
Well, I like it when each of us tells each other's stories. So Sohei, the really young guy, he came and his English was not so good, and he said, I want to photograph the yellow slime mold in Duke Forest.
And so that very evening, I went to an opening at the Nasher, and I ran into my 1976 freshman biology teacher from Duke, who's now a professor emeritus. And I said, "David, you're not going to believe this, but we have this young Japanese artist coming to town, and he wants to photograph yellow slime mold." And he looked at me dead in the face, said, "You know that my lab is the world expert on yellow slime mold, and my colleague at Stanford is the world expert on photographing yellow slime mold. He does all the journal articles." So I called Sohei back and said, "I got the two world experts on yellow slime mold queued up for you." And I didn't know they existed the previous day.
But the thing that was so funny, so we thought, okay, he's going to go photograph yellow slime mold. So his typical art is he goes to London to very tall buildings, and he just photographs like massively, and then he does contact prints, and he assembles these little images, and so his art is really thick because he's collaging them up. And so it's kind of like these medieval maps, and so that's what he normally does, always in big urban settings. And so if you go to his website, it's Johannesburg and London and Tokyo, and
A separate tab.
A separate tab for Duke Forest. So I think you need to go.
I know Frank's got to leave. We can hang on for a few more minutes. If anyone else has a question.
Whoa.
More questions?
Hi, because you've been kind of on watching the community develop over time, what are the trends you're
will say a trend that when we were preparing this, I was trying to get really sad, decrepit images from 2006 and then happy images from now. But with the with COVID, you know, a lot of storefronts are empty. So that's kind of a swinging back. But I actually was over at American Tobacco and I saw all these junior high students and I thought, oh, I guess they're having a field trip or something. And they have a school there now. And I think, wow, I would never have thought to put a school there. But how wonderful with COVID, they had empty space, the school needed a place to go and they started it. But as far as art, you know, there's everybody's talking about AI, all sorts of stuff.
Thank you all.
I'm just going to go talk to the Duke students and I'm going to follow up and get the architecture tour after. So I don't know, art is happening all the time, and you know, you guys are part of who's making it happen. Thank you for keep making art. So, any other questions? I know we've kept you long.
All right. Any other last questions? All right. Thank you all for coming to CreativeMornings. Thank you, Albert. We will be back in Durham next month. I think the date is April 26th. See you next month. Thank you for coming.